Hi everyone, welcome to this Startup Talks, the female leaders of the future, meet Anna Brynås. And today I want to highlight and focus on the female leaders of the future of business. Because the sad truth is that in the world of business, it's still men who dominate the most influential companies in the world. For example, statistics from WBA, the World Benchmarking Alliance's SDG 2000 list, shows that amongst the 2,000 most influential companies globally, only 21% of directors and 15% of executives are female. And gender balance in a company, in leadership, decision-making, and performance processes is an important step towards driving gender equality and empowering women in order to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. The good news is, though, that here in Sweden, we have one of the highest percentages of female board members, but there is still a lot left to do. So with me here today, I have a female leader of the future, Anna Brynås. And Anna is not afraid of stepping forward and taking actions. She speaks her mind and she's passionate about business, management, sustainability, and she has been crowned the female leader of the future by Sweden's management organization, Ledarna. And she has plenty of irons on the fire, as you can tell. And now she's also being a part-time business coach here at Lead since January. So today I would like to get to know Anna a bit better. I would like to know what motivates her. What is her view on great leadership? And what experiences does she carry? And what are her advice to other future leaders? I have plenty of questions to ask, and I bet that the audience does too. My name is Lina Helgason. I am community manager at Lead, and we are a business incubator. So I will start off by telling you a little bit about Lead and who we are, because maybe not all of you know us already, so I'll tell you a bit about that. And then I will welcome Anna to the virtual stage to have a little chat about her journey and her experiences. And then finally, I will invite the audience to ask some questions. So please feel free to write any questions that you might have in the Q&A function down below as we go along, and I will try to raise them during the talk or afterwards. So, and as always, I really want to push for this. Take the opportunity to ask questions and Anna will try to answer them. But first, a bit about Lead, for those of you who don't know us already. So Lead, as I said, is a business incubator. And then you might wonder, well, what is a business incubator? As a business incubator, we help companies grow faster and safer. So we are basically accelerating the development of startups with high growth potential to become scalable growth companies. So now, how exactly do we do that? Well, we provide idea owners and entrepreneurs a wide range of directed resources and services, such as network and business contacts, business coaching, and support to attract financing, and much, much more, of course. And we have two offices here in Östergötland, one office in Linköping and one in Norrköping. And we are currently working with around 45 companies or projects distributed over the two locations. And about 50% of these companies come from the industry and about 50% from academia. And we've been doing this for over 20 years now. We have evaluated around 1,000 companies or projects, and we coach around 180 startups in total. And we organize these startup talks once per month, where we invite inspiring and exciting entrepreneurs to share their stories and experiences. And hopefully it will inspire some of you to take that step towards the startup world. So now, the reason why you are all here today, why we have joined us here today. Without further ado, I would like to give a warm welcome to Anna Brynås. So nice to have you here, Anna. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. All right, so Anna, you've been the CEO of multiple companies, and you're, like I said, you're working part-time now as a business coach at Lead, but you're also part-time board professional and management advisor. So I would like to know a bit about, how did it all start? Where does this drive and interest in management and leadership come from?
That's a rather broad question, but I think it all boils down to that I have a very deep need to influence things. I can't remember ever having an urge to like be a manager or a board professional or run a company, but I've always had a huge urge to speak my mind and influence things and get to say my view on different matters, to be able to be heard, I think. And I think that's why I ended up in management and leadership. I was working at all these companies and I couldn't on earth understand why they were running things like they were. I wanted to do things better, but I realized to influence things, you had to be at the top of the company. So that's why I started the whole management journey. And after getting to the top, I realized that it all boils down to leadership. A company never gets better than its leadership. So I started to reading all these books about management and leadership and try to figure out what makes a great company and why some flourish and some fail. So it's been like a very interesting learning journey to see like what management theories work and which doesn't work.
So basically, like you said, it comes from a drive to be able to share your thoughts and make things better rather than having the status of being in charge. And like you also said, that in order to have the influence and be able to change things, you need to be in that management position, because the company will never be better than its leadership. But I would like to know a bit more about that. So what, according to you, is a great leadership? What is a great leader?
How long do we have? I think I could talk about this a long time. But according to me, I think, and this is my truth, it doesn't have to be your truth, it's just my perspective. I think there's three main elements to great leadership, and one of them is courage. You have to dare to make decisions. It's better to decide to go this or that way than to stand still. I see so many managers having such a hard time making decisions because they're so afraid of making the wrong ones. They just want more and more input, so they're standing still, and it's very expensive. And like, let's realize it's like 90% of the decisions we make, we change along the way anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. Just take a direction and go with it, and then change as you learn. Don't stand still. I also think it's very important to have the courage to make mistakes. And when you do make mistakes, own them. Don't sweep them under the carpet. Make sure that you have a culture where people are allowed to make mistakes. And when they do make mistakes, they can tell you about it, and you can find a way to deal with it in the best possible way. Otherwise, you will find yourself in a culture where no one dares to admit they're making mistakes. You have a blaming culture, and eventually the whole house will come tumbling down. I've seen it so many times. It's better to just be honest, because if you think if you make 5 decisions in a day, if 3 of them goes right, you're on the right way. You don't have to, all decision doesn't have to work every time.
That's good advice. And
so, let's say, then we have the first element, courage. My second element of great leadership, I think, is self-insight. It's very important. Like, all good leadership really starts with self-insight. If you don't know yourself, how can you lead others? So try to understand why you act and react the way you do. Often we react out of like pure instinct, but try to understand what's behind it. Like, if you try to find that small gap between what triggers you and how you react, like there's a small pause. Sometimes you feel like you're triggered and then you react. You can't do anything about it, but you can actually pause and then choose your reaction. Because often things are not as we seem. For example, someone runs into your office and starts accusing you of things. I mean, that triggers you, and the first response is, of course, to defend yourself. But often things is not about you. If you make that pause and try to understand, you can see that it often is about the other person and not you. You don't have to defend yourself. I think that's very important. And also spend some time to getting to know your values and what's important to you and why it's important, to really get to know yourself. Because if you get to know yourself, you can understand others. If you know why you are and act the way you do, you can understand why others have different patterns. And get to know your strengths and your weaknesses, and then focus on your strengths, because then you get more output. But make sure you have like people around you that kind of compensate for your weaknesses. For example, I'm a very like I like to see the big picture, like, and I'm like a fast train. I want to go ahead. So I always need, often it's the CEO or the CFO. I need someone that's very detailed focused, because I'm not. I just want to go ahead. I just want to run. And I need someone to like hit the brakes sometimes and like make sure we have everyone on board and every numbers are correct. And so it compensates. So you have a great team that kind of complements each other. What else in Selfinsight? I think it's very important to make time for reflection, because if you don't have time to reflect, how can you make things better? So actively schedule time to think about things. And the other side of that coin is I think you should have time for meditation too, because reflection is to actively think about things, and to meditate is to actively not think about things, to make some sort of disconnection between you and your thoughts, to make some sort of space of consciousness where you can be fully aware in the present. Because in the present, there is no suffering. Suffering is always in the past or in the future. So try to be in the present sometimes. Yeah. Oh, let's see. Now, that was 2 elements. I have a third one. I can talk about this forever. So my third one is integrity. Practice what you preach. If you want others to be a certain way, it has to start with you as a leader. If you have like you want a certain company culture, you have to act accordingly. Otherwise, no one else will either. And again, like integrity, make sure you know your values and act accordingly, even if in the hard times. When you want to take a shortcut, don't. Just stick with your values and your principles. And meditate.
Yeah, these are really great advice, and it sounds like you have a lot of self-awareness. There's a lot of things that you figured out. I don't know how to break this down. It was so much, and it's so interesting. Like, how do you even, have you always had that, or is that something that you realized along the way, like those factors that you just discussed?
Oh yeah, no, I didn't have that along the way. I've been really kind of been on this journey trying to figure out what is a good person and a good manager, and been inspired by like the great leaders around me, like people who I think have great leadership, managers I worked with or worked for, that has inspired me, and trying to just like find the bits and pieces that I like and puzzle it together. And also on my own spiritual journey, trying to be more true to myself. What elements of that can I bring into my leadership? Because everyone's leadership is different, and you have to do what works for you. You can't copy someone else, but you can like find bits and pieces that works for you. And I change all the time too. We have this amazing coach at Lead, Åsa, who works a lot with the team aspects, and I learn things every day that I try to implement. Oh, I can think about it that way, or maybe I thought about that the wrong way. Like just trying to tweak and try, because I mean, what's the worst thing? You just have to trial and error, see what works. I've done a lot of stupid things too in my management. So it's you just have to forgive yourself and move on and try to be better the next time.
And this trial and error comes with a lot of courage, as one of the things that you mentioned. Is that something also that you developed throughout this journey? Or, I mean, you seem like a very outspoken, honest person. Is that something that you always been, or has it developed throughout the journey?
I was a very loud child.
Okay.
for a lot of opinions. But I think kind of the courage part is, I think it's like I'm living a double life sometimes. In my work life, I think I can be very courageous and make a lot of decisions and handle the hard stuff. But in my private life, I sometimes find myself having very hard time making decisions, and I struggle, and I'm so afraid to make the wrong one. And sometimes I feel like I take so many decisions at work every day, so I don't have any energy. So when I come home, I want someone else to make all the decisions. I don't want to be bombarded on what should we eat for dinner, what restaurant should we go to, what are we going to do on our vacation. I'm like, just whatever. I love when someone else makes all the decisions for me.
Yeah. It's about having a balance, the work and life balance, I guess.
Yeah, so exactly. So it's kind of hard sometimes. It's kind of funny thinking about how I struggle with making decisions in my private life and just worrying. And then at work, I'm like, just go. But then I think I have that from my mother. I have this inner risk analytic. So on the outside, and like when I can be like, oh, go ahead, great idea, let's do it, just go. And in the back of my mind, there's always someone's like planning for disaster. All like, this will never work, or if it doesn't work, what should we do? So I always have a backup plan. And I think that's my mother. Her voice, like she's always looking at the risks. So I think that's, in some way, it's beneficial to always have a backup plan. Other times I feel kind of schizophrenic. I say like, go, go, go. And then I'm thinking about disaster.
But it's always good to have that risk analysis thoughts, as long as it doesn't stop you from going.
Exactly.
I just want to remind the audience again that if you have any questions, please feel free to write in the Q&A function, which will be found down below. All right, so Anna, there is no doubt that you have plenty of irons in the fire, and you seem extremely driven. So I would like to know a bit more about your motivation. What motivates you?
I thought about this a lot, and I don't know if you and I've talked about that sometimes, but I've spent a lot of time like digging into what makes people genuinely happy. And I come to realize that it's actually the same for me. What motivates me and what makes me happy is the same thing. So I get motivated and happy when I help people. It can be working in a soap kitchen. Oh, you wash people? No, soup kitchen. Or if I like coach someone to help them become what they want to become. So that makes me like very motivated and very happy. And I get happy from building like close, genuine relationships. And that's what I try to do at work too, to build trust in any way I can. And the third thing that makes me happy is like to really be present in what I'm doing, to not like just, the flow state when you don't want to look at your phone, you don't think about the next thing. I try to be really present. And when I find those moments and those things that makes me present, that's very motivating to me. I just want to do more of that, and makes me like truly happy. Mm-hmm.
And I also want to know a bit more about like this, that you've been in these positions that you've been, being CEO or decision maker. What challenges have you encountered in this?
I actually think I have some sort of self-destructive behavior when it comes to what companies I take on. It's like I'm drawn to difficult situations. Maybe not so healthy. So when I have like maybe a few examples of like huge difficulties, when I took over as a CEO or president of the Sweden's largest biogas group, I remember my first day at work, like going into the office, and remember I've never been a manager before taking this position. And so the accountant is waiting in my office. So I walk in and she's like running towards me saying, "We have no money to pay the salary next week. Like, just what shall we do?" And I was like, "Okay, I don't even have a computer yet." But like, okay, we will figure it out. And it was a total mess. We had municipalities, several of them, suing us. So we had like this huge like lawyer bills and all this process against us, and all our customers, I think almost every single one of the customers were like infuriated with us. They were so angry. So the company has been like run so poorly before, because it was just, they hadn't done no win-win agreements. It was always win-lose, and everyone was angry, and there was no good structure. So we just have to, like, getting into that was so stressful. And just finding, okay, how do we deal with this? Then I had like an amazing head of the board that I worked with, was a true mentor that taught me anything. I didn't know anything about balance sheets or economics. So he taught me everything. We had to work with the owners to get more capital. And I had to really, that's when I learned that all business is relationships. So I had to start building trust with the customers again, making sure that they trusted us so we could like renegotiate our agreements and building a more genuine partnership with them. So they and that they wouldn't sue us anymore. So that was an interesting and very educational journey. It was.
Yeah. And how did you go about, like, how did you start creating those relationships again?
I think you have to show your vulnerability and just be honest. Come in there saying like, we messed up, and listen to them so they can just say whatever, like the trigger and reaction. They come at you, don't react, just listen and try to understand. And then you can respond instead of react. And try to find a way. And it can take a few meetings, but eventually everyone wants to have a good relationship. And then you can find ways, and you have to compromise. It's not a win-lose, it's a win-win. So I think it was just meeting them and talking and taking time, being present, trying to understand them and their perspective.
But that, to me, that sounds super overwhelming. But to you, this was just a challenge. I mean, you must have been aware of this when you got into the company, that there were some struggles, or was it just thrown in your face?
I knew there were some struggles. I was a bit naive. If I had gotten the offer to take on this position today, I don't think I've ever had done it. But then I worked at the company before, and like I said, I wanted to run things differently. And I thought to myself, like, I can't do a worse job than the previous management, because I realized that when they called me and asked me if I would consider the position, I was at home on parental leave with the 6-month-old. Like, so the head of the board called me and he's like, "Oh, Anna, I think you should consider coming on board as the president of the company." And I was like with my daughter and covered in puke, and I was like, Lasse, the last time we met, when I was I was really, really fat. That wasn't cinnamon buns. That was a baby. I'm on parental leave. And he was like, "Oh, we figured it out together." And he had such a good experience of putting women in their 30s at the management and CEO positions. And he said, "You are the best. Women in their 30s are the best managers ever." So that was very encouraging, and he really helped me. He was a good mentor. But just thinking of women today, we sometimes have a hard time we want to check every box. We want to have every single experience we need for a position before we apply to it, instead of just going for it. And of course, it was super scary. My risk analytic was going like crazy with all the challenges and risks. but I also cared so much about the company and the employees and the industry. My passion was for biogas. So it was kind of a no-brainer, but it was a lot of work and it's super stressful. But at that time in my life, my whole identity was centered around my work. I'm not that person anymore, but back then my whole life was my work. I worked so much.
And now, speaking of that, that is the common thing, especially among women, this good girl syndrome. You're supposed to excel in everything. You're supposed to be, not question, not speak up. You just do what you're told. Do you have any advice how to get out of that? Because obviously you struggle with that in the beginning, having those risk analysis thoughts, but then you tend to just go for it and follow, believe in yourself and what you think is best. Do you have any advice there how to get into that mindset?
I actually think that is one of the hardest questions because I don't really have a good answer. It's the truth. Women need to perform better than men to get the same jobs. We need to always be 10% or 20% more and perform better. Men are hired more on potential, and women need to check every box to get the job. So I think it's kind of all boils down to like education for both girls and boys early on in self-care, self-worth, and just the inner judge you have that tells you that you're not good enough. To not be like the way we talk to ourselves in our mind, we're very hard on ourselves. I know I'm super hard on myself, but trying to talk to yourself the way you would talk to your best friend, instead of like this, you're worthless, you're not good enough, you can never do that, everyone else is much better than you. Like I had that before going live. Now my inner judge was like, who do you think you are going live talking about these things? Who would ever want to listen to you? We all have that voice. You're just trying to say that all thoughts are not true. And you can actually say, oh, thank you, Judge. You've been useful in situations where I'm in a harmful position, but now here's the seat, here's some popcorn. You can watch, but you will be silent. And then you can have a more constructive conversation with yourself. I'm actually in a program right now with high school girls. It's called the Bigger Sisters or Stora Systrarna, where we have like this female managers or women who's been working a lot or a longer time, that like we mentor younger like high school girls, and they've gone through a week's programming, just life knowledge, like how to talk to yourself, how to structure your life, and all those things that the school system don't teach. And just being able to talk with these girls about those things, like how to manage yourself and how not to listen to the inner voice or just speak your mind. Whatever, it's very rewarding, even like for me too, because now I can be the type of person I would have needed when I was in high school. So it's very rewarding, and just getting to know how life is for these girls. Like I still think I'm like 15 or 20, but I know I'm not. So it's interesting to hear how their life is right now.
It's a great initiative.
Yeah, definitely.
And especially, like we said, the good girl syndrome, and also like that you identify yourself with your performance, that you are your performance.
Yeah, exactly. And also, like, I think I never spent any time growing up thinking about what I liked doing. I was just like, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to go this way. You're supposed to be an engineer. You're supposed to have a career. You're supposed to have a big house or whatever. Like, I don't think I ever thought about what do I like doing. Still, I have a hard time figuring out what I actually like love and like doing, because that was never a question. I was good at everything without knowing why. Like, just ask yourself that question. Why are you supposed, like, I was so stressed about grades and getting good grades and getting into a certain school. Like, for what? Why am I supposed to be good at everything? Just talking about those things would have made a huge difference.
I have a question from the audience here, actually. Speaking of, you were talking about this, that 6-month-old little girl back home, and you were going to be a manager. How do you combine family life with partner and children with a strong career without getting bad conscience?
I'm divorced. I'm a very different person now than when I had my daughter. I was not a very present mom. But we managed, and I had my parents helping out a lot. And her dad, of course, he worked a lot too, but we kind of like, we met in the doorway. He traveled half the week and I traveled the other half, and we made it work. But like I said, we're not married anymore. So I think it's hard, but it's like you shouldn't need to work more than 100%. I wanted to work my whole, like I got all my gratification from like external, like getting things done, achieve things at work. I wanted to be at work. At home, I had a hard time. I had a really hard time becoming a mother, because when I was with my daughter, I couldn't perform. I needed to cross things off my list to feel that I had some sort of self-worth. And when I was with her, I could, like, the only thing I could do was to be with her, and I didn't achieve. So that was really hard for me. Now I find a completely different way to handle life. So like last year, I took a year off with my daughter because I didn't spend much time on parental leave when she was small. So I try to compensate for that now. So now we spent a whole year together. We bought a caravan or a RV, like a mobile home, and just lived slow for a whole year before she started school. So that was amazing. So the last 4 years, I've been a very much present mom. And since we have like this every other week life, so every other week I'm trying to be the super mom and work very little and spend as much time as I can with her. And the other week I can work as much as I want. I don't want to work as much anymore. But it is hard to balance, but I think it is possible. But you have to have an equal relationship. You have to help out. You can't be like, because a female, you can, this kind of, how can I put it? Even if you divide every single task at home in 50%, it always ends up with the female being the project leader anyway. So I realized this when I worked at a company. We had a startup creating apps for parents. So we were interviewing a lot of parents to find out like what their needs were in life. And we talked to one specific dad, and he said like, oh, we divide everything. We're so equal at home. For example, I always do the grocery shopping. I was like, oh, that's great. Then we started continuing talking. And then I had to like go back to that question, like, okay, so how does that actually work when you go grocery shopping? And it's like, oh yeah, I work, and then when I start a car and drive to grocery store, I call my wife and ask her what I should get. I mean, going to the grocery store, that's a long time. Yeah. So he didn't like, just being the project leader is also like, that's another 30% on your workload. Keeping track of all like the stuff you need, what's in the fridge, what you should eat, do the kids need new sneakers to school? Like, you have to weigh that into the equation. If you're the project leader, then you shouldn't do as much other things. But it's hard. I don't have the solution, but I think one main thing is to talk about it, communication, like in all relationships, really talk about it. and don't be passive aggressive about it.
That's good advice. I have another question actually from the audience. Speaking of this, that we spoke about courage in the beginning. There is a person here who's wondering, how do you dare to start a company by yourself? I find myself thinking that every idea is a bad idea, or just too big to accomplish myself. Do you have any advice there? How do you find that courage?
Sounds like it's your inner judge speaking. Sometimes I try to think about what's the worst thing that could happen, and take it even longer. Like, okay, if that's happened, that will happen, and and I will end up alone on the street with no home. No, that like how what's the possibility of that happening? But we have, like in Sweden, we have such a great structure of things that you can like start out with a few percentage with your company and then scale it up. But I know it's super scary, of course. But we at Lead have very good support for starting up new companies and helping you. But it's like, and just figuring out what to do, like what idea would work and not work. It's all about, you have to verify, talk to your potential customers. Don't start building something until you know someone wants it.
And also failing is not a failure itself, that it's just trying, it didn't work, try something else, and don't be scared of trying and failing fast, so you can focus on another idea.
Exactly, that's something I had to work a lot with myself, because I've grown up knowing that if I fail, I'm a failure. So it's better not to try than to fail, because if I don't try, at least I'm not a failure. So I've been like, this has been like a very deep nut inside of me that I had to like try to loosen, to allow myself to fail without being a failure. I failed at doing this. That doesn't mean I'm a failure. It means I'm learning. There's a great book about, you call it, it's static mindset versus dynamic mindset. Like if you have a static mindset, it's about like, you need to be good at something right away. And with the dynamic mindset, you can like, you realize that I just need to work on it and try more or spend more time doing it. Just thinking of, if you have a static or dynamic mindset, and it's not always like you always won. In some circumstances, you might have a static mindset. In one, you have a dynamic. But just to see when you fall into that trap of thinking that I need to be good at it right away, otherwise it's not worth doing.
Yes, that's great advice. I want to move on a bit to sustainability, because I see a common thread in your life that has to do with energy and environment. And like you said, you've been, for example, CEO of Sweden's largest biogas group. So I want to know a bit more about that part, sustainability. How did that interest start?
I don't really know, but I can remember bugging my parents about the recycling and composting, even at an early age. I think it has something about the anxiety, like you, as a child, you take everything on the news very seriously, or you heard things. I heard things like the world would go under, and then it was not about climate change. Then it was about the ozone layer, or acidification, or eutrophication, or deforestation, or I guess. But I had this it's huge anxiety about the world coming to an end. So I think I started like bugging my parents about, we need to recycle. I try to recycle and compost everything, like basically everything, in some sick way of trying to get the world not to fall apart. But that was at an early age. I think later on, I always had I was kind of an angry youth. I was like very confused and angry about all the injustices in the world, like the animal welfare, racism, feminism. Just, I think every other weekend we were protesting against something. just finding like, I think I need to be very passionate and also feel like the things I work with, that I contribute to a better world. It needs to have a greater purpose than just making something. For me, it needs to be, so sustainability was always trying to make this planet better. And now that I work more with business coaching, it's like making the planet better by inspiring and helping others. And helping people be what they want to be.
And you also worked a lot with circular business models. We don't have that much time, but I would like to know a bit about that. How does that work with the circular business models?
Is that the time? Have we talked this long already? Okay. So circular business models. So, yeah, I worked with 2 different companies that was based on circular business model. And it's like, if you take biogas, for example, it's about closing the loop of organics, of nutrients. So you take waste from farms, from grocery store, like household waste, like the organic part, and you from that you make a sustainable fuel that's carbon neutral, and then you also get the organic fertilizers that you put back to the land. So you get the waste and then you put the nutrients back on the land, so everything is circular. And I think something most people in Sweden don't realize, we have a growing demand for organic groceries or produce, vegetables. And the reason why that industry has, or the growing of organic crops in Sweden has been able to increase, is because we have this organic biofertilizer from biogas industries. So most organic farming we have in Sweden is around where we have biogas plants. So sometimes I would like for the bags of carrots to say like this is because of biogas, so people understand that we need to have this. And it's also a great way to handle waste, to get the nutrients back, so we don't have to use artificial fertilizers so much. And another example of a circular business model was when I worked at Econova, where we took waste from one industry, like from the forest industry, for example, what they regarded a complete waste that they paid to get rid of. And then at the other end, we could find an industry that regarded this as a resource. We might have to refine something in the middle, but then they could take it as a resource. So someone's waste goes into another industry, and then instead of like putting it in the landfill, we can recycle it to another industry, and it gets a longer lifetime. For example, taking waste from forest industry and making, here outside Norrköping, we make like soil that you use, like you buy at the Plantation or Blomsterlandet. You buy those bags that you take home and grow your tomatoes in. That's actually made outside Norrköping from forestry waste that you compost and mix with other things. Or we take like waste concrete and made the hard surfaces. And so there's a lot of ways to take waste from one industry and make it into a product that can be used. And also try to design new products for longer use, so you can reuse it or use components that can be recycled, or it's just, you can design so much for circularity these days. And I love getting into that in my coaching. Like that's so amazing working at Lead, because you're working with companies at such an early stage. You get to influence them before the product is made. You can coach them forwards a circular business model or a circular way of designing their product. And that's just amazing to have that opportunity.
Yeah, and we work a lot with that at Lead, sustainability, and getting that into the business model early on. So that's great. I have another one from the audience who's very passionate about sustainability, want to do as much as he or she can to contribute to better, more sustainable world. But the thing is that it's very exhausting, and sometimes he or she feels like getting burned out in all this. So what is your advice to get a better balance between contributing to a sustainable world and having a sustainable lifestyle?
I see the point. It could be very exhausting, especially if you find this like I talked about before, that it's anxiety driven, that you see everything you don't do, and you see that, oh, this is just me, I can't change or save the whole world. But if you focus on what you actually do and try to make it a fun thing and explorative, that's how I find it, because I can easily find fall into the trap of anxiety driven. Just be curious and try out new things. Doesn't have to be so fatal. You can try, you can decide, I try this now, and like find your way, what works for you. And you can't do everything. Like I tried to live without a car. Like I try to explore different things of like implementing a sustainable lifestyle to my own life. Minimalism is one of them that I love talking about. But yes, I tried to manage without a car, and it worked pretty well for a year and a half. We biked and we borrowed friends or my dad's car when we really needed a car. But then my daughter started on a soccer team. Mm. And apparently soccer games are all over the county. So I got this email, okay, on Saturday we need to be in Motala at 11. I'm like, I can't bike to Motala tomorrow morning. So I realized we actually do need a car. So we got an electric car. I always had biogas cars before, but now we have an electric one. So sometimes you have to compromise and not be so hard on yourself. Try to see what you do instead of everything you don't do. And try the minimalistic way. It's so fun.
But it's also like, I mean, this anxiety, and all you hear all the time is how like there's nothing to do in the world, like it's not gonna work out. But there are ways, and there are, world leaders that are working on it, and we as private, whatever you call it, individuals can also contribute. So the smallest thing is gonna at least do something.
Exactly.
But there is a lot on that you keep hearing how it's too late with everything almost.
But if there's a great book by Rebecca Carlson that's about exponential klimatomställning, climate reversal. What do you say? It's not climate change, but like how we can. I'm losing the word, but so all the technology changes in the world is exponential right now. It goes so fast. But when we think about climate change and reversing it, we're thinking linear. Why would reversing climate change be linear if all other technical development is exponential? So by partnering climate solutions with exponential technologies, we can come a long way. So if you want to be more hopeful about saving the world, you should read this book, because it's about what you can do. It's not about everything is coming to an end. It's like, this is the way we can solve this. We can come up to a solution. We can still reverse things. And I like to spend my energy focusing on what we can do instead of the anxiety part of things, because if that happens, it happens and it will be terrible. But I'd rather spend my energy on trying to do things better.
What was that book called?
Exponentiell klimatomställning of Rebecca Carlson.
There we go. So that's tip to the audience for you who are interested. Okay, so I want to finish off with a quite broad question too, but what are your main learnings to future leaders? What are your main advice?
I think they're kind of circling back to what we talked about before, but if you're not happy now, you won't be happy later either. Make sure to find your way of being happy right now. Finding the moments where, the beauty of the small moments. Don't believe everything you think. Talk to yourself like you're your best friend instead of listening to the inner judge. And like I said, don't be afraid to make decisions. 90% we change anyway along the way. And like, make sure you know what makes you happy. Spend some time thinking about that. Actually, what actually makes you happy? Do you know what makes you happy, Lina?
Those are the kind of thoughts that they're too overwhelming.
Exactly.
Thinking about.
And last but not least, I think you should try to implement some meditation in your life. Try to create a space where you are not governed by your thoughts all the time, that you can just be in the present moment and see the beauty of that. Then we're all one.
Those are great advice from a female leader of the future. Okay, Anna, thank you so much for joining us today. So I just want to say that these startup talks take place once per month. So there's another one upcoming in December. So keep an eye on our social medias and our website lead.se to stay updated with all the upcoming events. You can also check our previous startup talks on our YouTube channel lead.se. It's written in one word, lead.se, if you missed them. So again, thank you, Anna, so much for joining us here today. And thank you everyone who was here listening. And have a nice
Thank you for having me.